Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a Kickstarter preview. This one is for the Search for Planet X. This is from Foxtrot Games. It's a 2 to 4 player deduction game where we are looking for Planet X out here in this solar system.
And deduction games are one of my absolute favorites. Games like Letters from Whitechapel, Whitehall, and also games like Fury of Dracula. But we're seeing a insurgence of new games that use apps for deduction, namely Cryptid, which came out last year. And now we have Search for Planet X, which also uses a companion app that you can either use on each player's device or pass one device around the table.
Yeah, the inclusion of these devices in these games is perfect for what these games try to do. And this game, much in the vein of Cryptid, has one thing that we're all looking for. An interesting twist here is the first person to find it doesn't necessarily win because there's ways of scoring points through theories throughout the game.
So the game can be played in two different ways, either in standard mode or expert mode. We have the standard side set up, which has 12 different sectors around the night sky. The reverse side has 18 different sectors, which makes finding Planet X a little more challenging. Each of these different sectors is going to be broken into 4 different areas. They're going to hold your particular tokens that represent one of the different things in that night sky.
Right, because we're not just looking for Planet X, we're trying to figure out what are in the various sectors here and put forth theories for that. Planet X is going to be just in one of these things. In fact, each of these sectors is just going to have one of a few different types of elements.
Yes, each of these different elements is located on your particular sheet of paper. These include comets, asteroid fields, dwarf planets, gas clouds, and of course Planet X themselves. And all of these have particular rules on where they can be placed on the board. So as you start to deduce particular locations and find these different elements on the actual sectors, you're going to start to understand where other ones may be located.
Yeah, every player is going to know these rules from the very beginning, and these things include like asteroid fields must be adjacent to at least one other asteroid field. Dwarf planets cannot be located next to Planet X, things like that.
Yeah, you also have comets that can only be in prime numbers, and if you don't know what a prime number is, it's actually pre-printed on your particular sheet and also on the back of your player boards, so you understand where these comets can be located in the night sky. Again, it's your job to deduce where each of these are. Now, you can also play the game through various different difficulty levels, and that's going to be determined by the app itself. At the start of the game, based on the difficulty setting, each of the players is going to get a particular set of rules that they're going to mark on their own player sheet. They're going to tell you various sectors where these elements are not going to be located. So it may say Sector 8 does not have an asteroid. Sector 11 does not have a comet. And you're going to be crossing these out on your player sheet so that at the start of the game you have some elements right there at the start.
Yeah, and from that point on, you're going to be collecting information through a variety of different actions. It's going to allow you to keep narrowing it down, understand what's in what sector, and hopefully eventually find Planet X.
Now, before we start talking about how to play the game, let's also talk about the app itself. As I said, you can pass this app around to each of the different players when it's their turn. However, each player can bring their own device to the game, and it's simply one of the players is going to start it, and it's going to give you a 4-digit code. And then everyone's going to put in that code so everyone knows the same or is playing on the same game function, so to speak. So it's always going to have Planet X in the same location for everyone when you play it.
Yeah, and the game itself plays very easily turn to turn. You're really just going to take one of a few different actions on your turn, then move your pawn, and then adjust the board in a certain fashion depending on what action you took. Now, the pawns are going to move in a really interesting way, sort of like Tokaido, in that the player who's going to be going is the person who's furthest back. So if you take actions that take more of time, it's going to put you further around this track, and you're going to have to wait that much longer for your turn to come back around.
Before we talk about the 4 different actions, let's talk about the board itself. This is broken into a visible night sky and a not visible night sky. You have 6 different sectors here that you can see. This means these are the areas that you can interact with at that given time. One of the actions you can take on your turn is to scan. And when you scan, you're visibly looking up at the night sky, and you're asking the app about a very particular range of sectors where you're trying to look for something. So I may say I want to look between sectors 1 and 4 for comets. And then the app will tell you how many are in that particular range of sectors. Now, the trick is you're going to be spending X number of time depending upon how many sectors you look at. If you're looking at a small range, you're spending more time because you're trying to narrow it down. If you look at a larger range, you're not getting enough information that you may need, but the time that you're using is less.
Yeah, scanning is just one of the many actions you can take. Another one is to target. Now, target's going to be very specific. You're actually just going to, again, in the visible night sky, dictate one particular sector that you want to look in, and the app is going to tell you exactly what is in that sector. Now, a couple caveats. You can only target twice in the entire game. Everyone's going to start with 2 of these target tokens. When you do it, you have to discard that. You can do it one more time throughout the game. It's going to let you get very specific information about those sectors, and hopefully you can use that with the other information you have to sort of fill in some of the blanks.
There's 2 more actions you can take. One is to actually search for Planet X, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But one of the main actions you'll be taking only costs 1 unit of time, and that's to research. When you research, you're actually going to ask the app about a variety of different questions that it provides. And you may look through this or scroll through this particular range of things, such as asteroids and comets. It's going to tell you how those particular things relate to one another. Basically, it's giving you a new rule that you can write down on your sheet to abide by for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and that only takes 1 unit at a time, again, which is very important because you don't want to move too far because you're going to be waiting for your next turn.
However, you can only research 1 turn in a row, so when it comes back around to you, you have to pick another action. The final action that you could take is to actually search for Planet X.
Yeah, and when you choose this action, you better know where Planet X is because you need to know that and a little bit more. You're going to pick one sector and say, this is where I believe Planet X to be, but then you also have to know what the sectors beside it, the adjacent sectors, include as well. So you can't just at the beginning of the game start willy-nilly guessing where Planet X is and potentially win. You have to gather some information first.
Now that will trigger the end game. Before we get into the end game and what happens when you find Planet X, let's talk about when you actually take these actions. When you take an action, it's going to spend time, and you're going to move your dial clockwise around the night sky. So if I took 3 time, I go 1, 2, 3, and I put it to the furthest left, meaning that anyone that jumps over me or it lands in the same sector is going to go to my right, meaning I'm going to get to play before them on the next turn. Now, there are times when players are going to be moving around here, and when it gets to the furthest back player, the night sky is actually going to rotate to align themselves with that back player. And that's important because there are various sections on this night sky that are going to enact a very specific phase within the game.
Yeah, and that phase is called the theory phase. When the night sky or the visible sky hits one of these elements, you're going to stop there immediately, and everyone's going to be able to do the following. You're going to take these tokens from behind your screen, and you're going to have a number of tokens for all of those different elements that we've talked about that are in these various sectors. And if you think you know pretty well that there's an asteroid in Sector 5, in player turn order, you're going to put your token for that in the outermost section, and then again, it's going to go around the table. Now, not every player has to submit a theory, but this is how you're going to score some points at the end of the game, because various theories are going to score you points if you're correct, and if you happen to be the first person in any given sector to score that theory.
At the end of that phase, each of these tokens is going to move up, and when they reach the inner circle of each of these, you're going to go check these basically within the app to see if they are correct. Now, these are finite. Once you use them, they are used. And as David already alluded to, each of these different elements is worth a different amount according to your player sheet. So whereas asteroids are only worth 2 if you guess them correctly, gas clouds are worth 4 because there's fewer of them in the game.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing about this phase, it's called the peer review. The innermost token is going to be flipped over, and then that player is going to, with the app, do the peer review action where it's going to determine whether or not they were correct. If they were correct, all of the other tokens that are in there, meaning the other theories that other players may have submitted, are going to be flipped. Any ones that are correct are going to stay there. Any ones that are incorrect are going to be discarded from the game. Now, the other important thing to know here is that sector, you could not submit any more theories for that sector, obviously, because everyone now knows there's an asteroid in Sector 5.
There's one more thing that's very important about the board is that there is another visible area on it. This right here is going to create a conference. During the conference, one of the players on the app is going to enter information in there that's going to allow everyone to gain one more new rule about where these planets are aligned. So every full rotation of the night sky is going to give people more information about where these things are.
Yeah, so you're going to be continuing to do this round after round, moving your player pawns, moving that board until someone finds Planet X. If someone locates Planet X, it's going to bring a somewhat hard stop to the game, but any player behind them is going to have one last chance to potentially score some points by either submitting theories or also locating Planet X.
And so once you locate Planet X, each player, as you said, has a chance to score some points. You're going to add up those points according to those and anything that you got across the theories around the outside, and the player with the most points is going to win. So remember, this is a game all about deduction and uses the app in a very clever way that's going to allow players to enter information that other players aren't going to know.
Yeah, and it's also the first deduction game I've played that allows time to play a significant factor, because you take those more significant actions, it's going to cost you more time. If I've done that and gone around the board far ahead of Jeremy and then he finds Planet X, if I'm not behind him, I don't get a chance to score any more points. So it's a really interesting element, adding points to a deduction game.
So this one's going to be on Kickstarter. If you have any questions, make sure you guys go to the Kickstarter page or ask them in the comments below. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.